feet stretched out in front of her, arms folded across her stomach, and eyes closed. In her early 50s, the grey in her thick brown hair looked like threads of frost combed through. She wore it twisted into a generous, untidy swirl on top of her head. Mrs. Bug, that is, Sheila, I was uncertain whether I should use her Christian name, kept to plain solid-coloured dresses and unremarkable aprons that, although they weren't strictly uniforms, always gave that impression. Her sensible shoes told the tale of being on her feet for most of every day. She had lit the fire for me. The apple wood hissed, and the flames threw out a warm light across the floor and onto the four-poster bed. The far corner of the room opened into an octagonal-shaped alcove with windows all round, part of the turret at this end of the north wing, and just big enough for a bench seat, a few shelves, and a table. Mrs. Bug opened her eyes and leapt up. "I thought I heard you arrive," she said, smiling. "I'm late, I know," I said, hastily dropping my bag in a chair and my heels on the floor. I stripped off my uniform, navy pencil skirt, tailored white blouse and thin cardigan, and threw the pieces on the bed. "Has his lordship been asking for me?" "Only because he's concerned that you work too hard," she said, collecting my cast-offs. "Here now, a fresh cup of tea for you." "Oh, you didn't need to do that," I said, in total insincerity. "It was no trouble. And I've your dress waiting. Would you like to freshen up before you put it on?" I'd like to take a long hot bath and get in bed, that's what I'd like. But instead I would splash water on my face, put on a dress far fancier than I was accustomed to, and go down to mingle with some of Linus's contemporaries. 3 earls and a baronet, if I remembered correctly, plus wives. Also attending, at my request and a huge relief to me, my friend and co-worker Vesta Widdisham and her date Akash Kumar, who ran a shop in the village. At least I'd know someone. Mrs. Bug hugged my clothes to her chest for a moment and beamed at me. "I know I've said it before, Miss Lanchester, and I hope you don't mind my repeating myself, but it's so lovely to have a woman living at the Hall again to do for." She caught my panicked look and added, "however temporary." Just how temporary depended on the time it took for workmen to carry out repairs on an entire row of cottages in the village, including my Pipit cottage. Toxic mould had been found in the walls in August. The discovery of the mould at least answered the question of why my front door had never closed properly. It had been the damp. I had to move out on the spot. Health and Safety, the Environment Agency. I still didn't know who decided these things. Homeless, but with no time to consider my options, Linus had taken me slightly off guard when he had insisted I move into Hoggin Hall. I'd had other offers. My dad and stepmother Beryl begged me to stay with them in Cambridge. Too far away. Vesta told me her box room would be ideal, and I'd be no trouble. But Vesta and Akash had only just started seeing each other, and I would not be the gooseberry in that relationship. And besides, a box room isn't good for much other than boxes. The Stoat and Hare had a few rooms above the pub, but they had been booked up to begin with. Once I'd moved into the hall, it seemed ungrateful to pack up and leave after a week. And it was convenient. I was only a 20-minute walk to the TIC, 5 on bicycle, Linus's preferred method of travel round the estate. It meant I could pass my cottage each day on my way to work, my poor abandoned, cosy nest of a cottage. It looked so forlorn that after the first week I'd gone out of my way to avoid it, walking down Mill Lane and behind Newler's tea room before coming back out onto the high street. "I'm only increasing your workload, Mrs. Bug. I don't see how you keep up with the household duties you already have. Now with me to look after, I'm only another chore." "Not a bit of it. It brings back such lovely memories to be able to help you, even for a small gathering like this evening. I still remember the excitement of getting ready for large dinner parties when my mother was lady's maid for Lord Fotheringill's mother." "When I came on as lady's maid," she said, and hesitated. "Well, it was never quite the same with his lordship's first wife." I didn't like her using the term first wife. After all, Linus had been married only once, to Isabel. Although they had divorced 20 years ago, she retained use of her title, Lady Fotheringill, forever, as long as she didn't remarry. But first wife made it sound as if the vacancy had been advertised, and Mrs. Bug